Hello and welcome to Representative Rick Larsen's Town Hall. My name is Pam Larkin and I am the Communications Director for Representative Larsen. I will be moderating today's Town Hall. Thank you for taking the time to join us and we hope that you find this call informative. Representative Larsen will be taking as many questions from community members as he possibly can in the time that we have. In addition, we will start today's town hall hearing from Assistant Democratic Leader Joe Neguse, who is the chairman of the Rapid Response Task Force and Litigation Working Group. The Rapid Response Task Force has been helping Democrats to push back against the unlawful and unconstitutional executive orders and agency actions coming from the Trump administration. If you have a question to ask Representative Larsen, you can press *3 on your phone keypad at any time, and you will be placed in line to speak with a member of our staff. Staff will take down your name, where you are from, and a summary of your question. The next time you hear your name, you will be live on the call, and you will be able to ask Representative Larsen your question. If you are streaming the event on larsen.house.gov or on Facebook, welcome. You can simply type your name, where you are from, and your question below the streaming player. As you can imagine, we will receive a lot of questions during today's event. If we are not able to address your question, please leave a voicemail after the event or send an email to rick.larsen@mail.house.gov. Again, if you have any questions throughout the town hall, please press *3 on your keypad or type your question below the streaming player. If you would like to sign up for Representative Larsen's e-newsletter, you can press *6. Now I will turn the phone over to Representative Larsen.
Thank you, Pam, and good afternoon, and thank you all for joining me. I want to thank all of you for taking your time to call, to email, to write, and rally outside my office in response to the chaos and confusion of the Trump administration. I hear you, I share your concern and frustration, and I am fighting back. I just want to let people know right now, and we'll have more, there are 5,276 people on the call, and certainly we're going to expect a lot more folks. Hey, today we're joined by Assistant Democratic Leader Joe Neguse. Representative Neguse is from Colorado. He's the chair of the Rapid Response Task Force and Litigation Working Group, as well as the U.S. Representative for Colorado's Second Congressional District. Assistant Leader Neguse is joining us on the phone today to share some information about what Democrats are doing to protect and defend everyday Americans from the Trump administration and the DOJ. I'm going to have a few comments after Assistant Leader Neguse speaks, but I want to hand it over to Assistant Leader Neguse for some comments. Joe, go ahead and take it away for a little bit.
Well, first and foremost, thank you, Ranking Member Larsen, for giving me the opportunity to say a few words and to be with your constituents tonight, and for convening this really important teletown hall. As Rick mentioned, I have the privilege of representing Colorado in the Congress, serving as the Assistant Democratic Leader in the House, and chairing the Litigation Working Group and Rapid Response Task Force, which means that I have the opportunity to work and partner with outstanding leaders like Ranking Member Larsen, who, as was mentioned, is standing up for all of you and the people of Washington State as we fight back together against the unconstitutional and unlawful actions that have been taken by the President Trump and his administration over the course of these last 8 weeks. Of course, tonight's teletown hall is an important part of that process in terms of both keeping all of you informed about what is happening and how House Democrats are responding in this perilous moment for our country and our republic. The Litigation Working Group and Rapid Response Task Force was impaneled by Leader Jeffries, the Minority Leader of the House, roughly 30 days ago, and it was done to create a clearinghouse for all of the comprehensive ways in which House Democrats are responding, in particular to the unlawful executive orders and to the agency actions, because this really is an all-hands-on-deck moment for our democracy. We're responding in a number of different ways, and Ranking Member Larsen, by virtue of the leadership position he holds, of course, as you all know, as the lead Democrat on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, has been an important part of our response. We're responding really in three ways: legislatively, litigation in the courts, and using the oversight and investigative tools that are available to us in the House of Representatives. First and foremost, focusing and zeroing in on the litigation. We know that many of you are following the court cases that have developed in courts across the country from coast to coast. There are now over 130 lawsuits that are pending in federal courts across the United States against the Trump administration's illegal and unlawful actions. And in the vast majority of these cases, the Trump administration has failed in its efforts to defend the propriety of its actions. What does that mean? It means that in over 40 cases, federal judges have issued temporary restraining orders or, in some cases, permanent or preliminary injunctions against the Trump administration's actions. Those include the illegal funding freeze, which was found to have been violative, of course, of the Constitution and the powers of the Congress, in particular, the power of the purse. The potential purge of federal employees in land management agencies and a variety of different agencies across the federal government. Just last week, two different federal courts ultimately held that purge of federal employees was unlawful and reinstated wide swaths of the federal workforce, as well as a number of different federal court cases that have developed over the course of the last several weeks regarding the activities of DOJ and the unfettered access that they once had to the Treasury Department and a number of other agencies that has since been curtailed by, again, federal judges in different states, including Washington State. House Democrats are active in supporting this litigation, and that includes taking the unprecedented step that we took just a few short weeks ago in making clear our position through an amicus brief in the case of the Consumer Protection Financial Bureau, a case that was pending that ultimately involved the Trump administration's attempted dismantling of that particular agency, which protects consumers, the people of Washington State, people of Colorado, from financial exploitation. We will continue to look for opportunities to be involved in the litigation, and we look forward to keeping all of you apprised on that effort. Secondly, we are responding legislatively. Over the course of the last 2 months, House Democrats have worked vociferously to introduce pieces of legislation that would stop in its tracks these unlawful agency directives, whether it relates to the protection of personal data or a bill that was just introduced last week to prevent the dismantling of the Department of Education, which we've now learned the Trump administration is attempting to proceed with just a few short hours ago via an executive order that has no basis in the law. We'll continue to introduce legislation, and we encourage you to send your ideas and your suggestions to Ranking Member Larsen and to the Litigation and Response Task Force directly so that we can take up those suggestions in the days and weeks ahead. Finally, we're using the oversight and investigative tools that are available to the House to ensure that this administration is held accountable. That includes demand letters that have been successful in compelling the administration to reverse course, perhaps the best example being the letter that was signed by over 140 Democrats within the House of Representatives imploring the federal government to pull back in the unlawful and ludicrous email that was sent to federal workers just a few short weeks ago. OPM subsequently indicated that that email, or rather the response to it, was voluntary on the part of the federal workforce. We believe in part because of the outrage expressed by so many Americans across the country and the actions that House Democrats took in the hours after. Suffice to say, as I mentioned, it's an all-hands-on-deck moment. I know the past few weeks have been met with chaos and confusion, sparked real fears and anxieties, but I hope you all know that as Ranking Member Larsen referenced, we hear you and we will continue to fight for you. And you are in good hands with Congressman Larsen leading that fight in the tip of the spear in Washington. I'll turn it back to you, Congressman Larsen, and look forward to answering questions.
Thanks, Joe. I appreciate you being on, and we'll get to questions. And just a quick note, the website for the Rapid Response Task Force for everybody is Litigation and Response, which is all one word, litigationandresponse.house.gov, and you can go to that website and track the work that we're doing to push back against the administration. Now, before we get to questions, I want to give you an update specifically about some of the work I'm doing as the lead Democrat on the House Transportation Committee. We're not in the news a lot, because we don't do the Department of Education, we don't do Judiciary, we do Transportation. But we are working very hard on the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee as well, taking several actions to push back against the Trump administration, demanding answers from the administration on how the DOJ terminations of critical Federal Aviation Administration safety workers will not jeopardize aviation safety. We're amplifying the voices of our members of our own community that the Trump administration is hurting, such as Lummi Nation Chair Tony Hilaire, who testified last week in front of my committee about how extreme cuts to the Environmental Protection Agency will force a choice between higher rates for ratepayers to pay for clean water and to pay for wastewater treatment, or to pollute the waters of the Salish Sea. And like many Democrats, I voted against the Republican budget, which betrays the middle class by gutting services that helps families afford health care, help put food on the table, and to help them receive a quality education. And as Joe noted, nearly 130 lawsuits have been filed directly challenging actions by the Trump administration. And as he also noted, more than 40 court orders have been issued blocking the administration's illegal and unconstitutional actions, including bringing back now 24,000 probationary federal employees that were illegally fired by the Trump administration, unfreezing the funding that was put in place, and just recently another order ordering the DOJ to comply with Freedom of Information Act requests. But there's a lot more to do, and I will say this. The first 30 days of this administration was boiling all the spaghetti they had and was throwing everything up on the wall to see what sticks, and a lot of it was sticking. The next 30 days, they're boiling the rest of their spaghetti and throwing it on the wall, and a little less of it was sticking. And now, because of the work of the Litigation Response Task Force, because of the work of Democrats, and because of what we're hearing from you all, less and less and less of what this administration is doing is sticking on the wall. We're holding them accountable. But there's a lot to do, including pushing back, as Joe said, this ridiculous executive order dismantling the Department of Education, which cannot happen. Only Congress created the Department of Education. Only Congress can get rid of the Department of Education. But we have to certainly watch what the administration will be doing in the budget proposals to not fund the department, as well as many other agencies. I want to give you a flavor of what's happening in my office quickly. My office has received more than twice as many messages and more than 4 times as many phone calls as compared to this time in 2024. Let me give you a number on that. Last year at this time, my office has received 35,817 messages. To date, in 2025, we received 76,570 messages. And on the phone call side, it was 2,114 phone calls through March 20th of last year. And to date, we've received 8,917 phone calls into my office from folks who are looking for us to do something, to get some questions answered. So just last month alone, we received 208 calls and voicemails per day on average. So you're sharing your stories, you're sharing your concerns, and your questions to me is essential to fighting it back against the Trump administration and the DOJ. I would also note on the litigationandresponse.house.gov website is a place for you to share your story. You can go into that website right now or afterwards and share your story to help us create those stories or find those stories in order to continue to push back against the egregious and unconstitutional and illegal actions the administration is taking. So with that, we're going to have a lot of questions, I'm sure, and I want to before I turn it over to Pam, when we get to questions, I think I'm going to try to have Assistant Leader Neguse field a few of the first questions because he's, as chairing this Litigation and Response Task Force, or Rapid Response Task Force, he may have a few more things to add, and so we're looking forward to that. So Pam, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Representative Larsen and Representative Neguse. One more reminder, if you are listening on your phone and you have a question, feel free to press *3 at any time or press *6 to sign up for Representative Larsen's e-newsletter, which is a great way to stay informed. I also want to encourage everyone to follow Representative Larsen on Facebook. You can find him on the username Representative Rick Larsen, and follow him on Blue Sky with the username @RepRickLarsen, and on Instagram with the username @RepRickLarsen. With that, we are going to go to our first question for Congressman Neguse from Peter. Peter, you are live on the call.
The question relates to the Department of Education. This seems to be a pretty severe and unnecessary move on the part of DOJ or whoever's doing it to eliminate funding for education. What action can we take other than write letters? It needs somebody that can really stop the uncontrolled elimination of everything. It's almost like we're trying to privatize our government, which is not possible.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Joe, go ahead. Joe Neguse.
Yeah, thank you, Peter, for your very thoughtful question. I'd say a couple of things. Of course, I certainly share your sentiments. Dismantling the Department of Education makes no sense. It is short-sighted, and it will have dramatic negative consequences for students in Washington State, students in Colorado, kids across the country, educators, rural schools in my district and in Congressman Larsen's district. When you think about the functions of the Department of Education, providing support for students with disabilities, Title I schools in some of our rural and urban areas, it is just nonsensical that the Trump administration is now attempting to dismantle the agency. And in addition, it is unlawful. The president does not have the authority under the Constitution or federal law to abolish the Department of Education. The department was created by an act of Congress, and only Congress can ultimately determine its fate. I believe that there will likely be litigation in the coming days regarding the president's executive order, and without making any kind of announcement tonight, I would simply tell you that the litigation task force is monitoring it very closely and will look for opportunities to be able to articulate the view of House Democrats as it relates to the unlawful and unconstitutional nature of that executive order. In addition, our colleague Jahana Hayes, who represents the state of Connecticut and was the 2016 National Teacher of the Year, she has introduced a bill that would, in effect, reverse this executive order. We just need 3 Republican colleagues, 3 Republicans of good faith to join us and protect students and teachers across the country by joining this piece of legislation, and we could avert the executive order's impact. So those are 2 ways in which we are responding, and we'll certainly have more to say here in the coming days.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. And this is Rick. I'll just quickly note, just so folks understand, we have, as members of Congress, we have a lot of authorities and so on. We do not have individual authority as members of Congress or as a body to sue the administration, which is why we are working with nonprofits, with state attorneys general like our own Nick Brown here in Washington State. We're working with unions and with individuals to help, one, identify really strong, good cases to challenge the administration, and then supporting those folks. But we have the ability to shine a light on what is going on. I find that on my committee on transportation that when we kind of do the old we know where you live routine, that is, we see what you're doing, administration, we know what you're doing, we're telling everyone what you're doing, they tend to slow down or reverse what they're doing. And so there are authorities there that we can use, but we can't sue as a Congress. We can't sue the administration, which is why we are working with other folks. And Peter, we're going to continue to do this not only with the Department of Education issue, but many other issues. Yeah. Pam, next question.
Thank you, Congressman. I have another question here from Margaret in Edmonds. She asks, what can we do as citizens to push back on the Trump and Musk damage to our democracy?
Yeah, Joe, you want to take a first crack at that?
Sure. Yeah, there are a number of ways. First and foremost, I appreciate the question and your interest and your willingness to engage at a moment as critical as this one, and it's going to take all of us engaging, and so I appreciate you asking that question. There are a number of ways that you can be a part of pushing back against the unlawful executive orders, and some of these have already been mentioned by Rick. Of course, first and foremost is sharing your story, going to litigationandresponse.house.gov and sharing your story about the ways in which these agency actions are impacting your community in Edmonton and beyond. Those stories will be amplified by Rick, amplified by me, by members of the task force and House leadership, and ultimately, I believe, will help shape public opinion sufficient that some of these actions will in fact be reversed. We should not assume that the institutions, public institutions, whether that's the executive branch or the Congress, are impervious to public opinion. As Rick mentioned, the public outcry and the sharing of stories in response to the illegal funding freeze ultimately led to the Office of Management and Budget under President Trump to withdrawing that illegal funding freeze before it was ultimately held unlawful by a federal court. So all a long-winded way of saying we need your stories. We need you to share what's happening on the ground. We also need you to share the whistleblower resources and tools that are available for folks in the federal workforce and others so that they can ultimately report anything that is of an unlawful nature. And those resources and tools are also available on our website. And then finally, we'll need your ideas. Neither Rick nor I purport to have all of the solutions at a critical moment like this. It's going to require everyone being creative and nimble and suggesting different ideas and approaches that we might consider taking in the House as we respond in this moment. So we encourage you to send us your ideas, and I hope that you'll do so.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. And this is Rick. I'll just add one thing to this, to give it a kind of story behind it. On the Transportation Committee, we are trying to track all of these grants that the administration say they're going to freeze. These are grants that go to cities or counties that help build roads, a bridge, highway, the construction of transit agency facilities, and so on. And we're trying to track all these grants because some of them have been frozen. But we don't find that out automatically. We end up hearing from like the city of X or the city of Y, and we hear from those, and they have to tell us this because there's a lot of money out there going out through grants, and we can't track it all of them individually. We have to hear from people, and that's a lesson I think for everybody. For every member of Congress in Congress right now, they may not be hearing from their constituents, and it's important that we hear from you. It's important that you call the office and let me know what you think. And if you're involved in one of these, in a city or a county that's getting grant money and that grant money has been frozen, if you don't tell us, we don't know. And so we're kind of relying on you a little bit to be active radar to help us do our job on this. So you can be part of that as well. You can go to litigationandresponse.house.gov, tell your story. Also look at the whistleblower resources there. Federal employees can use those whistleblower resources, and you can help us by communicating with everyone in Congress about what you want us to do, and if you're involved with a grant and it's getting frozen, telling us so that we can try to unfreeze that grant.
Thank you, Congressman. We have another question here from Joe in Bellingham. Joe, you are live on the call.
Thank you. Hi, Rick.
Hey, Joe.
My question is, what alternatives do you have if the Trump administration ignores these court orders and ignores these judges? It seems like there's quite a bit of pushback by Trump discrediting the judge and some of the other legal entities. And with the DOJ and with the Supreme Court, it makes me very, very nervous.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. And I'll let Joe Neguse try to answer this first, and this will be the final question that Representative Neguse will be on for. He's 2 hours ahead of us, and so or 1 hour, I forget what it is in Colorado, but it's probably around dinner time with his great family. So, Joe Neguse, you want to take a crack at that first?
Yep, thank you, Rick. Joe, such an important question, one that I know so many of us in the litigation working group, including Ranking Member Jamie Raskin, who's the former chair of the Judiciary Committee and serves as the co-chair of the litigation working group, have been working through and discussing, and it's an item of active conversation because we, like you, are nervous and we share your sentiments in terms of the potential for the Trump administration to ultimately defy a court order in the weeks and months ahead. First, let me just say more broadly, federal courts retain an immense amount of authority under existing law to enforce court orders. They have the ability to hold parties in contempt, both civilly and criminally. They have the ability to impose sanctions, writs of mandamus, seizures of property. Federal courts have the ability to sanction attorneys who are members of the bar making representations to the court. All of those authorities exist today. They are authorities that are deployed in courtrooms across the country, in Washington State, here in Colorado, from coast to coast. And if the Trump administration were to disobey a court order, the federal courts have the ability to utilize any number of those tools. Now, I understand that that answer in and of itself is, it perhaps does not, satiate, fully respond to the question. The reality is there is no panacea here. The fear that you have, the hypothetical that you've described would be one unprecedented in the modern history of the United States. And it would ultimately, I think, require the United States Congress, including our Republican colleagues, to step forward and defend and vindicate the Constitution and the separation of powers that has been sacrosanct for the better part of the last 252 years. So I would simply say to you that there are lawyers across the country, and of course within the litigation working group, actively working through the answers to your question. But I also believe that we must have faith in the Article 1 and Article 3 branches of our government to vindicate and defend the Constitution. And as I mentioned, federal courts having the powers that they do would certainly have at their discretion the ability to use those tools if and when they believe them necessary.
Yeah, and this is Rick. You're seeing right now a judge that the administration has attacked and has said should be impeached. By the way, it doesn't. Let's try to stay focused. It doesn't matter what the president says about wanting a judge to be impeached. It has zero legal impact, and so it's like one of those things you should just. You don't have to ignore it, but there's probably the next thing is probably the more important thing, whatever that next thing is. And this is the judge in the case about the deportations. That judge is continuing to gather information, specific information about when these deportation flights took place, and lining up that. And his goal is to line up that timeline with the decisions as a judge he made and ordered the administration to do. So. And he's not doing that because he got up one morning and decided to do this for fun. You can only, and I'm not an attorney myself, but the way I read the tea leaves is like he's lining up his the timeline from when he made the order to stop these deportations to what the administration then did afterwards relative to that timeline to have his own case to be made about what actions he might take next. I have no idea or insight what actions a judge might take, but again, he's not. He isn't doing this for kicks. He's doing this in order to try to establish that timeline in order to make some decisions about what to do next. I'd also note, and then I'll let Joe Neguse go. I'd also note, again, to go back to it, of the cases that have been initially adjudicated in the court where a court has made a decision about these 130 lawsuits, not all of them have been decided one way or the other, but of the ones that have been decided, over 40 have gone against the administration, and that represents a vast majority of the cases that have been where there has been an initial legal decision on it. So the courts are working. We haven't won everything, and there's a lot to go. But look, this is not a 2-month game here. This is a much longer game, a multi-month game. It's going to define things like the elections next year. It's going to define things like the elections in 2028, and it's going to define a lot of the decisions that we make even between now and sometime in the summer when we're dealing with the budgets and the spending decisions we have to make. So. There's a lot of levers here that are still at work and still available, but being used at the right times as well. So, but thanks Joe from Bellingham, and I'm going to stay on the line, so don't hang up, people. Because I want to say
thank you, Rick, and thank you,
Representative Joe Neguse.
Thanks for having me on, and thank you to the people of Washington that you serve. And I hope everyone will heed Rick's comments, which is to stay focused, stay strategic, and stay hopeful. We'll keep at it, and that folks keep the faith. So thanks again.
Thank you, Joe Neguse. Appreciate it. All right. Thanks. Pam, next question.
Thank you, Congressman Neguse and Congressman Larsen. We have a question from Curtis from online. He asks, how are you protecting Social Security and Medicare?
Thank you, Curtis, very much. I have been always a strong supporter of the scrap the cap bill. That would scrap the cap that currently limits the amount of tax someone has to pay towards Social Security. As a member of Congress, I make $174,500 a year, and I don't pay a Social Security tax on all of that. I pay a Social Security tax on a portion of that, but that it is limited. It doesn't seem fair to me that folks who make over 174.5 or 174.5 and above aren't continuing to pay into the Social Security system. That we are limited in what we can pay in. It's a regressive. That is, it's not a progressive tax, and so I think that's one way. I'd like to see scrap the cap be protected, and we're also just fighting this administration currently on the closure of Social Security offices around the country, as well as their change in procedure that is going to force hundreds of thousands of people to go into Social Security offices that they're closing in order to prove that they're alive and to prove that they are the people they say they are. It's going to put a burden, an unnecessary burden, on a lot of folks, potentially kicking them out of the Social Security system. And it's totally unfair. It's egregious. It's mean and mean-spirited. So we're fighting that as well. On Medicare, we're holding the administration accountable to the promise that Trump made, that he won't make any cuts to Medicare, to Social Security, or to Medicaid. Well, we already know he's going to make cuts to Medicaid. He's clearly trying to limit access to Social Security benefits through these efforts to close offices and make it more difficult for folks to get into the system and re-up if they are in the system. And so, I can only assume at some point he's coming after Medicare too. So we're prepared for that. We're watching that. There hasn't been a big indication yet that that's going to occur, but we're tracking that very closely. Thank you. Pam?
Thank you, Congressman. Our next caller is Lisa from Linwood. Lisa, you are live.
Thank you so much. Hi, Representative Larsen. I'm a health home care coordinator, and I visit 50 seniors in their homes monthly. My seniors are scared of the Medicare and Medicaid cuts, but also the loss of me, who helps them live as independently as possible for as long as possible. We all want to know, what is the Democratic caucus doing to stop or mitigate these cuts? And what is your game plan for my senior safety, housing, and health care?
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. I will take your question for the record and get you something more detailed, because it is a detailed question. But I will say generally yesterday that I met with the ARC of Snohomish County. That is a nonprofit group that advocates on behalf of individuals who are largely dependent upon Medicaid for their health care, as well as being people. These individuals are disabled in some respects. And I heard a lot from them. So it is similar to the situation that some seniors are in. Heard a lot of stories from people who also have in-home health caregivers who come in order to provide some support to the parents and give the parents a break. It's analogous to the role you're playing to go in the home of seniors and you're likely being largely being paid through dollars from Medicaid for that. And they're very concerned, as you are expressing, very concerned about what the Medicaid cuts might mean. So with that as a premise, we are making the best case we can in Congress about the danger to access to health care, including home health care, of cutting Medicaid. The committee in Congress that's responsible for Medicaid funding has been directed to cut $880 billion, billion with a B, over 10 years. It's $88 billion a year from the programs that it oversees, and most of that money is Medicaid. So when the Republicans and the administration, when Trump says he's not cutting Medicaid, they clearly are going to cut Medicaid. How they're going to do that, we don't know yet. And so all I can offer you, Lisa, is that we know that this is going to be tragic for a lot of people if the Republicans are successful. I wish we had the majority in the House. We don't have it in the Senate. I wish we had the presidency, but Democrats don't. But we do have Republicans in the House of Representatives who have districts that, frankly, these districts are 50-50 districts. And these Republicans are very, very concerned about the impacts of Medicaid cuts, and we need them to step up. We need them to stand up for the people in their districts, because if they don't, those people in the districts may turn against them in a couple of years. And so we are trying to really emphasize these stories and trying to get these members to see these stories, these same kinds of stories in their own districts. So I don't have a very clear answer for you right now, because I don't know what the end result will be. I do know where I'm going to be. I do know where a lot of my colleagues are going to be, and I do know we need to find a few more of colleagues, Republicans, to kind of flip on the president to support people who need this access to health care. And it's not just the health care that they use. These are health care dollars that pay for people like you, Lisa, and others who go into homes so that seniors can live as independently as possible and with as much dignity as possible in their homes for as long as possible. It's healthier for them. It is more comfortable for these seniors, and it's clearly what an advanced society should do, and we don't need to go backwards. Pam?
Thank you, Congressman. Our next question comes from Sharon, who is participating online. She asks, who can we call besides our Washington delegation to express concern?
The White House. You can call the White House. I have to tell you that when we got, in mid-February, we received 17,000 emails and phone calls in the matter of 2 weeks, organized by 2 groups nationally. And it was great to hear from people in the district. We also heard from people who weren't in the district. But they were calling my office to tell me something I was already going to do, to fight for them. And the one institution of Congress, the one institution of government that wasn't hearing or getting these calls was the White House. So I would encourage folks to ensure that when you call me, when you're done, call the White House, and be sure the White House switchboard is getting these calls as well. You may not think Trump cares. I think you'd be right. But that should not stop you. You shouldn't call only the people that you know are with you. And I would say that calling other members of Congress won't be as effective because the Constitution is really clear. We are representatives from the districts we represent, and we represent the people in those districts. So there's no member of Congress who's obligated to take calls from people who don't live in their districts, because they get enough calls, a lot of calls from the people in their own districts, and they have to serve those people first. And that's fair. I think that's totally fair. But there is one person in the government who is supposed to be representing everybody. and that's the person who sits in the White House. So rather than call Republicans who are in districts that are swingy districts, I think it's a lot better to be calling the White House and communicating to the White House what your views are on things, in addition to calling my office.
Thank you, Congressman. Our next question comes from Tom in Cedro Woolley. Tom, you are live.
Good afternoon, Rick. I'm a disabled veteran, and I'm feeling unsecure about my income, and I'd like to know if that's going to be, forever deal. And And the VA staff has been cut, and it's hard for veterans to communicate with Veterans Administration, and we need to feel more secure about that. Yeah.
Thanks so much for calling in. Thanks for your service. Very much appreciated as well. And I will want to note that part of some of that 24,000 probationary employees that were hired back because there was a lawsuit that the Trump administration lost, and a federal court ordered the rehiring of these employees. Some of those folks were in the VA, and I was able to meet with some of these folks in our own area who were former active duty military people who, when they left, they got a job at the VA in the last year. And then those people were summarily fired by the Trump administration. Now, those folks are now getting their jobs back, but not because of anything the Trump administration did. So I'm hoping that the VA is able to focus on having the right number of staff, for sure, not have any number of staff, but the right number of staff, but the right number of staff that therefore can be responsive to folks like you, Tom, and others in the area for the help that you need. Now, with regards to benefits, to date, I haven't heard any concerns about cuts to veterans' benefits. That hasn't popped up on my radar. I'll certainly look out for it. But I do think the challenge for folks like you and others who have a disability rating, for those not veterans or in the VA system, it's called a disability rating. If you want to get that rating reviewed or re-reviewed, or you think it needs to go from 50 to 60, having people at the VA to do that is important. And if the VA is cutting those people who actually do these disability rating reviews, then it's going to delay your opportunity to have that rating review done, and therefore impact your benefits, your potential benefits. So we need to be looking out for that. I will note, I was just in Oak Harbor earlier today, and I visited the urgent care clinic, the naval clinic at the Naval Air Station, Whidbey Island in Oak Harbor, and talked to VA personnel there, because next month in April, the VA will be opening a primary care satellite site at the Naval Air Station, Whidbey Island's Naval Clinic, to take some pressure off of the Mount Vernon community-based outpatient clinic, and so therefore creating some additional opportunities for access to health care for our veterans community, for primary health care. So while a lot of the national picture is happening, and there's chaos and there's confusion and there's distress, a lot of us are working locally in our own districts to try to be sure that we're still being responsive to the needs that we have here in our own districts, and like for instance, expanding access to health care for our veterans. But so, Tom, I think right now we're watching it closely. I think the biggest impact would be, again, if there aren't people there to do disability rating reviews, or if there aren't physicians or nurses because VA is not hiring people. Those are the things we're looking at right now and trying to stay on top of. Thanks.
Thank you, Congressman. I have one quick reminder and question for everybody that is listening in. We have a survey question, which is, where in Northwest Washington are you calling in from? If you are calling in from Snohomish County, please press 1. If you are calling in from Whatcom County, please press 2. If you are calling in from Skagit County, please press 3. If you are calling in from San Juan County, please press 4. And if you are calling in from Island County, please press 5. I'm going to repeat that one more time. Our survey question is, where in Northwest Washington are you calling in from? If you are calling in from Snohomish County, please press 1. If you are calling in from Whatcom County, please press 2. If you are calling in from Skagit County, please press 3. If you are calling in from San Juan County, please press 4. And if you are calling in from Island County, please press 5. Thank you for everyone who responds to this survey. As a reminder, you can press *3 on your keypad at any time to get in the queue to ask a question. A member of our staff will collect your questions and we will answer as many as we can during this live event. Again, you can press *3 on your keypad at any time to get in the queue to ask a question. If you are participating online, you could submit your question below the streaming player. Also, for those of you that would like to join Representative Larsen's e-newsletter and you are participating by phone, you can press *6 on your keypad and a member of our team will add you to our newsletter list. Our next question, Congressman Larsen, comes from Ashley, who is watching online. Her question is, what are you doing to protect immigrants in Washington from Trump's attacks?
Yeah, thank you, Ashley, for the question. The Trump administration's been really clear that they want to limit immigration, even legal immigration, and they are as well trying to deport people, and they've been successful so far. But I covered that with regards to the case related to Venezuelans that are being deported contrary to the judge's orders and the judge's response to that. But I think when you look locally, there's a couple of groups of folks. One are folks who are here on temporary protected status. That includes folks from Afghanistan and from Ukraine, mainly in our area. And the administration is so far has not indicated they plan to extend the time for the time that these folks from Afghanistan and Ukraine can stay in the United States, despite the fact that temporary protected status exists for folks like Afghans and Ukrainians who are coming from countries that are at war or have been attacked otherwise. And so this includes Haiti as well. So we are tracking it closely. The administration hasn't been vocal about that just yet, about what they plan to do, whether or not they will extend that timeline. But we're watching it closely because we want these folks to feel safe in the United States. They're very active. Their kids are in schools. They're working with appropriate legal employment authorization documents. So they're doing everything right and doing everything and basically just doing it right because the United States promised that we would keep them safe. And so that's one group of folks. The other group of folks is you want to think about the farm worker population that's in the United States. Some of those folks are coming to and from the United States across the international border with Mexico on legal H-2A visas, and they travel around the United States during egg seasons, and they go back to their home country after the agriculture season's over, and that's something that happens all the time. It's not unusual. at all. And there's concerns in the ag community about whether this administration is going to allow those folks to come into the United States to work, to get paid, to harvest the food that we eat, to otherwise work in areas on a seasonal basis that they've been doing for years. And so that's another area we're looking at and staying on top of. And then the other issue is folks who are here without documentation, who came into the country fleeing murder, fleeing oppression, looking for work. The truth is, for those folks, they are in the country illegally, without documentation, but many of these folks are also active in our communities. They are working, they are paying taxes, their kids are learning English, they're doing everything I would expect them to be doing. They're attending church, not that I expect them to do that, but these are folks who are deeply religious as well. We know that by census numbers. And so I think it's important that we, for the long term, we need to rethink what our immigration policy is. It does need to be more rational. It needs to as well be humane. It needs to be focused on developing the countries that these people are fleeing from, so there's less of a desire for them to leave their country of origin. It's not an easy trip, we know that. And there's economic opportunity where they live. That needs to be part of whatever immigration policy that we do end up with. But for those who are here, I think it was Obama would say, look, if they want to work, pay taxes, learn English, if they haven't committed a crime, property crime, felonies, or so on, then we should find a way to have legal pathways, legal, L-E-G-A-L, legal pathways for them to stay in the country and continue to participate in our economy, in our communities, in our churches, so that they can continue to contribute to the United States and the well-being of the United States like they're doing now. That's what I would like to see happen. And but I assure you, this administration doesn't want to see it happen that way. And the end result will be the practical result for everyone will probably be increases in the price of food, more importing of food rather than growing our own food. It will mean a immigration system that is burdened further. But we also have seen this administration back off from the things they wanted to do, like detain people at Guantanamo Bay. What they found is that it's very expensive. The Department of Defense was breaking its bank by flying people to Guantanamo Bay. So those flights have stopped. In fact, there's nobody being held at Guantanamo Bay anymore for under that detention program. I double check that, but if it is, it's like in the low hundreds, if any. So it's been a extremely unsuccessful program this administration is trying to implement. I think if they were to take my advice, we'd probably find a pathway to better control our own borders, help Mexico control its own borders as well, and have an economy that and a country that welcomes people who want to work.
Thank you, Congressman Larsen. Our next question is from Andy in Bellingham. Andy, you are live. Andy, can you hear me?
Oh, yes. Sorry.
You are live with the Congressman. He's ready to take your question.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks for holding this town hall and listening to all of our voices and concerns. I would just like to know where you stand to be able to protect the HUD housing program. I currently work for a chronic homeless, and I work at a housing first model. So I'm worried also employment, my income, not only that, but hundreds of people that this housing first model houses, and keeps off the streets would then just be exiting into the streets, and it'd be creating more of a houseless problem than we're already experiencing as a country. So I'm wondering where you stand on that and what's being done to push back on those cuts, as well as where you stand to protect our national forest from unregulated logging, and what's being done to protect our national forests and our public lands, and kind of like, what we can do to fight for that.
Thanks, Andy. I'll just first focus on the HUD housing. As I noted at the beginning, I'm on the Transportation Committee, and so I can answer questions till the cows come home about the Transportation Committee. And generally, there's issues on Medicare and Social Security that I can answer, and VA, and so on. I'm not as up to speed on HUD, which is a housing and urban development, Department of Housing and Urban Development. That said, there are hundreds of Section 8 vouchers being used in the district to help people stay in their homes, and there are programs through Opportunity Council in Bellingham or Whatcom County, the Bellingham Housing Authority, Skagit Housing Authority, Island Housing Authority here in Snohomish County, where I am currently. There's Housing Hope and many others, as well as the Snohomish County Housing Authority, that use vouchers, as well as use a low-income tax credit to help develop more affordable housing. And then we have the shelters as well, who participate in that. So it's really well aware of the network and how important it is to maintain that network. The role that for everyone here, the role that these housing organizations play is an important part of the affordable housing equation in the Pacific Northwest. We don't do a lot at the federal level with like market housing. If you're going to go shop for a house, and you can do that, it's very expensive. If mortgage rates are high, I'm not making the argument they aren't, but you can go do that. But if you're living on the edge, that's where the federal dollars go. If you're on the edge of homelessness, the federal dollars exist so that you can get a roof over your head. If you also need support services to help you deal with whatever, if there's some personal issues that are contributing to your homelessness, there's support services in some programs to help you deal with those issues, so you can maintain that roof over your head. And the Housing First model is a little different. You get the person in the housing first, get a roof over their head, get them stabilized first and foremost, and then you work on the next steps depending on the program. And these are all important because if folks are complaining to me, and some do, about the homelessness problem, and they're not homeless, they have a home, then the answer is, well, then help me deal with this problem. Help me resolve this problem by supporting these programs in the housing at the federal level that help the state and help local governments and help local housing authorities and local nonprofits who actually do the work. Help me support them by fighting against these budget cuts so they have the dollars to do that. Otherwise, the person making the complaint to me is just sort of screaming in the wind at themselves. And so I just want to assure you that we are tracking this. I'll track it more closely so I have a better answer, a more specific answer. But like a lot of these programs, the Republican budget does not envision supporting them. And why is that? It isn't so they can cut the budget to reduce the deficit. The Republican budget exists specifically to scrape the budget of about $1.5 trillion over 10 years in order to only partially pay for the $4.5 trillion tax cut that is going to go to the richest 5% of people. According to a nonpartisan Yale budget lab, the Republican budget would cause the bottom 40% of Americans, that's 40% by income, to see their costs go up, while 70% of the benefits from the Republican budget would go to the richest 5% of people. That is not fair in any way, in any shape, in any form. I'm sorry to sort of go off track a little bit from the question. I think I answered housing question as best I can answer it right now, but also reminded me about why this is even taking place. It's because the Republican budget, it's clear in its intent. Scrape the budget for $1.5 trillion over 10 years to help only partially pay for a $4.5 trillion tax cut that most people I represent won't see. And it's wrong. It's upside down, but also shows where the values are, where the values of the people who would support this budget are. So, thank you for the question.
Thank you, Congressman Larsen. We have another question online from Duane. I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong. The question is, how will federal transportation dollars allocated for Washington and Oregon projects be affected by the new administration?
Thanks for the question. Appreciate it very much. And this is something I can answer. I spend a lot of my time chasing down frozen grant dollars that have been allocated to City of Everett or the Port of Bellingham or Port of Anacortes that have already been awarded and there's contracts signed, but the dollars are frozen because the administration is basically daring us in Congress to stop them from freezing these dollars. And to date, I'd say we've been pretty successful because the bipartisan infrastructure law that we passed in late 2021, signed by the president in late 2021, was pretty specific about the amounts of dollars and where those dollars are supposed to go. And also, we had 3.5 years to get a lot of those dollars out the door. So contracts have been signed by cities and counties and states with the federal government, and so this administration is really hard pressed to sort of turn their back on these contracts because they're enforceable by law. The bigger challenge we're going to have going forward is there's still 1.5 years or so left on the law that we passed, and 1.5 years of dollars that haven't been awarded. So the administration has a relative amount of freedom in allocating those dollars by awarding them and maybe under different conditions. And so, whereas the previous administration, the Biden administration, focused a lot on investments in transportation that would not just move people around and move goods around, but also try to reduce carbon emissions, do it in a more environmentally friendly way. This administration doesn't care about that at all. So this administration, as we're going to probably see in the next couple of months, is going to have grant notifications, notifying people that grant money is available, but they'd have to spend them under different conditions. And maybe look at things like marriage rates or birth rates in an area to determine if that city or county is going to get dollars. It doesn't make any sense. I'm married myself. I support people getting married. We have 2 children. I support people having children, especially if they can support them. But I don't really think it's a good idea to tie getting money to help rebuild a bridge to marriage rates or birth rates, because I don't think it has anything to do with that. And so going forward over the next couple of years, we're going to be watching that, how this administration is going to try to shape where those dollars go by shaping the conditions under which they give the money out. And rather than focusing on things like road safety, rather than focusing on things like repairing bridges that need to get repaired, the highest priorities to get repaired, focusing on things like updating the transit buses that you're riding in your communities, whether it's urban or rural. We're fighting them right now on on sidewalks and bike lanes because the administration says that's too green. We should be building more lanes of highways and roads. And my point has been there are over 40,000 highway and roadway deaths in 2023 in the United States. These are all preventable deaths, all of them. About 20% of those deaths involve someone who's walking or someone on a bike. So it makes sense to me that instead of saying, we're not going to let you use this federal money to build a sidewalk because that's too green, that's too it's not letting cars drive, we ought to be saying, okay, how about if we build the sidewalk so people don't get hit by a car, so people don't get killed if they're walking instead of a side of the road, they're walking on a sidewalk. What if we separated bikes from the cars so the cars didn't have to worry about bikes and bikes didn't have to worry about cars, and then we can cut that 20% of deaths on the roadways down to zero, and we've saved lives. What if instead of thinking about the environment, we thought about saving lives? Would that be a good enough argument for you to spend dollars on sidewalks and on bike lanes? And if that isn't a good enough argument, frankly, I don't know what's going to be a good enough argument for these folks in the administration. So we've got some challenges ahead of us, Dwayne, on where the rest of these dollars go. But also, you go to my website, larsen.house.gov, and we've got a document there that outlines the things I'm doing to push back on the committee, on the Department of Transportation, and the website of the Transportation and Infrastructure Democrats as well has a list of the things that we're doing in the transportation sphere of what we are doing to push back on the administration as well. And it's on my personal site, it's under the Transportation tab. So if you go to larsen.house.gov and look for the Transportation tab, you can click on it there to get more detail about what I'm doing. Pam?
Thank you, Congressman. Our final call of the night comes from Matt in Camano Island. Matt, you are live on the call with Congressman Larsen.
Hi, Rick. Matt Lotion calling. And I think that not only Democrats, but Republicans too, have been amazed by the bravery of the people of Ukraine in keeping their country free. What can we do as a country now that the Trump administration seems to be opposed to that? What can we do to help these people?
Matt, thanks for the question, and good to hear from you. Look, did I ever think really that that President Trump would just do a 180 on the entire United States foreign policy and cozy up this much to the authoritarian dictator Vladimir Putin? There may be some people who would say, yeah, you should think that 180. I maybe thought 150 degrees, but I didn't think he would just totally toss Ukraine to the wind, that we'd have a Department of Defense and a Secretary of Defense who would, and a Secretary of State who would throw Ukraine under the bus as they have. But they're doing that right now. And there's a couple of things we need to be thinking about. One is, in our state, if you don't know somebody who's Ukrainian, you know someone who knows someone, maybe who knows someone who's Ukrainian. My district alone is it's in the top 20 of all districts in the country as people from Ukraine or Ukrainian Americans. And that can be said for several of the districts in the state. Ukrainian and Ukrainian Americans are your neighbors, they're your friends, they live in your community, and they love America, and they hate what's going on. I know this because I hear from them. I meet with them every 2 weeks at the Ukrainian American Association. So at home, you can support your friends and neighbors. You can be a hand that they can hold. You can help them if you have the skills, the background, the connections. Help them with the legal fight that might be coming on the temporary protected status. So you can do things locally to help. Nationally, I think it's really important that you all continue to let me know and let Adam Smith know, who's the top Democrat on the Armed Services Committee. Marilyn Strickland, who's in the 10th District down in South Puget Sound, who's on Armed Services Committee. Be sure that you let us know that you still continue to support Ukraine as a very young, struggling democracy against an illegal invasion. And that the end result should not be a negotiation between Putin and Trump. I don't trust a negotiation with Trump. I don't trust a negotiation with Putin. and I sure as hell don't support a negotiation outcome with both of them involved. A future of Ukraine has to include Ukraine. And then on top of that, we've got heat in this office from this, but I continue to support military aid to Ukraine. And don't let anyone tell you different. The United States, the total aid from the United States between economic aid, military aid, humanitarian aid, is still less than the aid, total aid combined from everyone else. This myth that somehow we're the only country doing our job. There are so many countries involved with supporting Ukraine, and the U.S. is one of them. We're the biggest, and that's great. I love being the biggest. But being the biggest should also be being the proudest of supporting a struggling democracy. So talking to your members of Congress to continue to encourage them to stand strong with Ukraine in Congress is important, while recognizing the folks are our neighbors and they need support and help as well. The Ukrainian Association of Washington State is active. They have a website. They can best tell you, here's how you can help us locally. And I want to encourage folks to do that. So Matt, thanks, and hope you're enjoying Camino today as well. Hey, that's going to wrap it. Pam's got a few things to wrap up with. I will note that we had 16,291 people on the call at the highest point. On this last call, we had 1,021 people total hang out the whole time, and I really appreciate that very much. Pam's going to follow up with some follow-up for everyone who's still on, and I'll turn it over to Pam Larkin. Pam.
Thank you, Congressman. I want to thank everybody who took some time out of their Thursday afternoon to join us and participate in our democracy. If we were not able to get to your question this evening, you can leave a voicemail after the event, and you can send us an email at let me repeat that. It's rick.larsen@mail.house.gov. You can also call our office at 425-252-3188. A recording of this town hall will be available. If you want to access that recording, the best place to find it is going to be on Congressman Larsen's Facebook page with the username Representative Rick Larsen, or on his Blue Sky page with the handle @RepRickLarsen, and also Instagram with the handle @RepRickLarsen. Thank you again, and have a good rest of your evening.